Okay. Okay, hi everybody. I think a couple people are trickling in, so we'll just wait. I'm so excited that everyone is here, and we'll be going through this really interesting discussion about AI and exactly how we can maintain our human creativity and really still benefit from a lot of these really, really powerful tools. So while everyone kind of hops on, I'm just gonna get the slides ready, and this is all going to be recorded, and we can send them out, and you can all get the content as we move forward. So let me jump right in. All right. Great. Okay, so let's begin. So we're starting off, and I wanted to frame this discussion by starting with this quote that really says, if the observable universe were the size of Earth, our entire planet would be smaller than a grain of sand. Can you imagine that? And on that grain of sand, we humans are building artificial intelligence. So it kind of puts everything in scale and will really help us kind of understand the technology a little bit more and how we can start approaching this really, really fascinating time we're living in. So, welcome to Leading with Human Creativity in an AI World. Thank you for everyone who is here and everyone who will be receiving the content afterwards. And we're going to have a really, really interesting discussion. And let me just show you the roadmap that we're going to be taking. So, obviously, we're going to be starting out with the what. So that's really focused on what's AI, the 101, the models, a kind of overview of some use cases with some team building information. And then secondly, the why. So what's the social discourse around this, the political turmoil and some economic opportunity, as well as some information around ethics and governance, which is super important. And then finally we'll look to the how of it. So enterprise solutions, consumer workflows, and we'll have our amazing panel to go back and forth and really help us unpack this a little bit more. So let's dive right into it. So the what, and this is where we start. So AI at a high level is a type of technology that learns from data and performs tasks that usually require human intelligence. Bare minimum, we're starting from scratch. So that's what AI is. And when we look more closely at the layers of AI, we see that AI is actually a huge field with subfields under it. So we have artificial intelligence as the broad field. Then we have machine learning, which more focuses on how these models can intake information and then learn from the data and then use that to help us make actions or decisions. And then deep learning, where we get closer to that generative AI, which is what's blowing up the market right now and has been for the last 2 to 3 years, that's more focused on intaking this data and then building these neural networks to more efficiently identify patterns in the data, right? So how do we identify the patterns and how can those patterns help us make more decisions? And then generative AI. So whether that's Cloud, whether that's Gemini, whether that's ChatGPT, this is the big thing people are talking about, right? Generative AI as that new thing, because now the AI is able to not just intake the data, but then we can create content across many different formats, whether that's text, images, videos. That's the real generative nature of generative AI. And how did we all get here? So this is a picture of Dr. William Atchison, head of Electronic Computer Center at Georgia Tech, way back in 1959. So the time when computers were the size of entire rooms. And at this point, the idea of a transformer or a chip was the entire room, right? This is what the systems are really built on. And then we moved here to coding. So print Hello World as the basic 101 coding computer science class I can remember. And we swiftly moved to this, the generative AI aspect of it. So Hello World, and this is really showing us how we're now creating new content and able to interact with machines in a totally different way. As I said, we can create a bunch of new content. We can create, intros and things like this and change the formats, right? We can constantly redo and reimagine how we interact with these tools, and not just create images, but create moods, create atmospheres. Think really about immersive experiences, where a lot of games are now using generative AI to cut down on a lot of cost for creating these environments. So whether that's positive moods or something more negative, you can see how generative AI gives us a lot of tools to create worlds and create a lot of content that's really impacting and really interesting for general use cases, which we'll dive into. And more importantly, I want this up to be an opportunity where persons see the value of AI and are so curious that they kind of run towards the light of sorts and really see how we can make something that's interesting, something that's um, you know really bring everyone along in an equitable way, so that we can at the end of the day deliver for humanity, because this is really really high stakes, right? So I'm going to explain how AI works in a way that's easier to understand, and I've seen a lot of other persons do it. So think of Gen AI and these tools kind of like a sieve, right? So from the prompting, you put in the prompt, or you put in files, you put in images, and then on the other side comes that useful bit, right? So that might be a report or a presentation or a keynote or an opinion or an analysis, right? So it's as same, we put in what we want, we get something useful out of it. And if we're talking about what we really get useful out of it, it's ideas. So one of those things is just ideas, concepts, which is very big for my marketing friends who are watching right now. And then we also look at the strategy portion of it. So talking about planning, thinking about trade-offs, assessing projections, all the things focused on strategy, and then the content piece of it. So whether that's written content, whether that's a table, a chart, a Gantt chart, there's so many possibilities. But I think those three main buckets is a good way for persons to kind of start understanding ideas, strategy, and content that's useful to anyone really. So now we're going to segue into, so we've talked about AI being a way that machines do tasks that usually require human intelligence. We've kind of gone through the history a little bit, and now we're focusing on how to get the value out of AI through prompt engineering. So say hello to generative AI. Really, talk up. It can't hear you, right? So to speak its language, we're focused on the skill that's hot and everyone's trying to figure it out, prompt engineering. It's not just writing something to get a result, although that's the basics of it. There's so many mechanisms behind what's a good prompt. So let's just intake this definition of a really important way to view it is a skill. So crafting precise instructions for models to produce solutions, and that solutions piece is very important, and that helps you not just make a random picture of Bugs Bunny, but something that's more useful, and we'll dive into that a little bit more. So this is the prompt engineering process, and this helps you see how exactly we go from problem, prompt, solution. So think of the prompt as the bridge between the problem and the solution. That problem might be, I need an opinion about whether or not I should buy this particular brand of mustard versus this brand of mustard, because I have high cholesterol, so I need that solution. Or I need a solution because I have $50,000 and I want to invest it in this particular campaign, but I'm thinking about, should I, try to source another $50,000 and make the campaign a little bigger? The trade-offs, that's the solution I need. So how do we go from problem to solution with that prompt in the middle? And this gets us to the core of what we're trying to communicate here, right? The anatomy of a great prompt. Three main things. We have clarity, so being very clear, what do you actually want? And a lot of people stop here because they don't think about, what do I actually want? I want to understand this. I want an analysis. I want to plan this project, so I need a project tracker. I want to create this graphic, so I need a graphic with these specifications, right? So that's the clarity piece of it. The second piece is the context. What are you giving? What are you putting in the sieve, right? What are you putting in that sieve so that there's something to work with? That's the context. And that might mean I have this Gantt chart. This is the timeline for the project. Or I want a menu for a dinner I'm hosting. There are 9 people, 3 of them are lactose intolerant, right? That context is super important. And then finally, which is the impetus for this entire talk, is the creativity piece of it, the human creativity piece of it. So how exactly are we as humans contributing to the prompt and creating something that's useful and interesting at the end of the day? So yes, I need a graphic, but maybe because I've read reports that, hey, right now nostalgia is really in for marketers and advertisers, so I need the image to have this kind of imagery from the 90s, right? That's the human creativity, the human element that comes into creating a prompt that's extremely effective at delivering what you actually want, and that's what we need, right? So at this time we're going to be transitioning into the idea of building a team that has these skills, right? So we've talked about what AI is, we've talked about this idea of the prompt having this anatomy of how exactly you get use from it, and now we're distributing it into the actual team structure, right? How exactly are teams going to be adopting this? And I've done a basic schematic of a marketing team, a basic marketing campaign team, where you have the team lead that might report into a VP C-suite in terms of budgeting and larger scale P&L decisions. But then we have an AI-powered strategist, an AI-powered data analyst, an AI-powered designer, as well as an AI-powered project manager. So what that means is we have the core functions of strategist, analyst, designer, project manager, but then the AI component of it accelerates their thinking. So it might mean that the strategist is now able to read 50 reports to help you make sure we run a strategy, or the data analyst is now able to intake more data points and help us better visualize the data through using generative AI, or the content designer is now able to make more interesting content because they have all these great tools, whether that's video or images. And then the project manager is now able to take meeting notes, break down the components of a project, put that onto a Gantt chart, and keep the team on track. So what this is showing us is how you can have a regular marketing team, and when you have that AI powered aspect towards them, the team members help to do more, and it makes it more interesting and more options for the actual goal of whatever campaign you're actually running. So this is a real breakdown of what I'm talking about. So we have the role, what it amplifies, and how we can stay human. So we have the role, so designer, strategist, media pro, right? How does it actually amplify them? So whether that's more ideas, so instead of 3 directions, you get 20 directions in half the time. Instead of I'm only able to write 5 scripts, you get 15 scripts. So you're able to get more value and able to easily distill what's useful, what's not useful, what can I test, right? And what can I just discard as we're not going in that direction. And the human element of this is how are you bringing the voice and storytelling to the scripts, right? How are you bringing your aesthetic and brand instinct judgment to the designed outputs, right? And how is a founder, for example, bringing their vision and their relationships to the product or the project idea that they're building off the ground, right? So what I'm going to do now is just briefly go through what a marketer use case might be for an Instagram ad. So a marketer is making an Instagram ad for a shoe company, and these are just some background details. A younger audience, they want it to be fun, vibrant, and with bright colors, and they want the messaging to be confident and outgoing. So what do? That intro designer might say, okay, let's start using AI. Let's go back to our prompt, right? So the problem is we need a graphic for a social media ad, right? And the solution, very specifically, is a visual ad that is 1920 by 1080 and of HD quality. And then the prompt, using the anatomy of the prompt that we've gone through, helps us be clear, give context, and show our creativity. So we want a surreal image, massive glowing sneaker, for example. We want tiny people climbing on it, and we want it to be minimalist. We want it to be photorealistic, and we have the dimensions of 16 by 9 aspect ratio, which is basically just horizontal, right? So we've had this is the layout of how the anatomy of the prompt really helps us to be clear and get the value out of these AI systems. And then look, there we have our ad. So we are now able to say, okay, We wanted an ad. This is the first image that we might start using for this, and then we put some text around it. So this is an example of how AI can be very, very useful for a designer. And then obviously with your specific brand guidelines, your colors, your aesthetic judgment, then you're able to enhance this and create campaigns that are really, really, really interesting. Okay. So we're going to go to practical usages, but before, we're actually going to dive a little bit into the why of it, because I think that's also important. So we're going to talk now about the social discourse around these AI systems. So this is an image showing what Gucci actually posted a couple days ago for their new Primavera collection, and they said created with AI, and you can see the the sentiment right there, right? If you're going to call yourself a luxury brand and charge more for your products, people expect artistry. People expect people to actually working on this. They expect photographers, designers. They're not really looking for something that's just AI and AI slop, as people would say, right? And this also tracks to when you actually look at the idea of trust, right? How is the public trusting these particular AI tools, and more importantly, how is the public looking at the government and really the infrastructure, its ability to regulate? So we see that it's actually split in America. We have 44% say the country they're divided between trust and distrust in terms of the ability of the government to regulate AI, and that's pretty standard as we're looking through something that's very polarizing. But I saw this is the discourse going on now around, is this image really artistry? Why is this company using it if they can afford it? And does it change the calculus if we move from criticizing Gucci to then saying, okay, if a single mom with two kids is starting a business, she needs a graphic, she uses AI to make that graphic to get her business off the ground, is that AI slop? And if it's not AI slop, then how long are we going to then call it AI slop? Is it 6 months after? Is it after she's gotten this much more in profits? Like, what is the indicator that, okay, you've used AI enough, we've determined that you no longer can use it because we will now call it AI slop, right? Those are the questions we'll be talking about, right? How exactly are we balancing the utility of it with wanting to preserve jobs for creators, which is extremely important, and also balance the policy around how do we regulate it, right? So a lot of people are scared, right? They're asking, can I trust AI? And that's a very, very, very fair question. I wanted to pull this example of I think it was I think almost a year ago. There was this huge blow up where this terrifying Willy Wonka event used AI images to mislead the guests, right? So not just a campaign, but they actually say, hey, this is how the event will look. They use AI. It did not look like that, obviously. So that's a big, big problem. So people were shouting, they were crying, they were wanting their money back, and that's really the negative aspects of AI, when persons aren't able to contextualize it and say, okay, if I'm going to advertise this, I better make sure I deliver on this, right? So this is one of the use cases where we're very clear about how AI not just gives general negative sentiment around, is this artistry, but now we're creeping into false advertising and misuse of funds, which trickles into fraud, right, as a real issue going on. um, and as we move from the social aspect to the economic aspect of it, let's look at the investment. So we've seen around $225 billion in corporate investment for AI, and that's from Stanford's AI index analysis. And then we projected to, from last year, we're still getting the numbers about 1.5 trillion in investment for global AI spend. And we're seeing Gen AI, that small portion of AI I mentioned, increase by multiples of 8.5. So that's really significant, showing us that investors are betting heavily on AI. And as we talk about investors betting on AI, I think we really should think about when we see headlines about this new tool being amazing, this new tool revolutionizing this new tool totally eliminating jobs. Remember, it's in the interest of the persons investing in these companies to be very clear and have a very popular narrative around AI replacing jobs. I'm not saying not replace jobs and it's definitely on track, especially some of the models we'll be going through. But it's important to know that there's always something that you need to filter those headlines through and keep aware of exactly how we're discussing AI and being responsible. And this brings me to the K-shaped economy. The K-shaped economy is a manifestation of the recent market downturn from COVID-19, almost 6 years now. And that really is showing us that in the recovery, so the recovery that's from that particular downturn, we have two main prongs. We have the industries recovering steadily, the technology, retail, software services, and we have industries needing a lot of assistance. So travel, entertainment, hospitality, food services, restaurants are some of the first businesses to fail, really. And what we're seeing is that there's no this demarcation of, you know about AI, you know about these tools, you know how to use them, you're in that upward trend. And if you're not, you're projected to be in that lower tier. And my hope is the more we spread information, the more we really get the message out about these tools, the more we're able to close that gap and make sure that people can actually um, be prepared and be empowered to respond in this economy and thrive, right? Again, this is just another breakdown of the K-shaped economy, showing the AI-enabled workers and the AI non-workers, and really that split that's really happening, and how the opportunity is definitely there. And the risk, obviously, is without intentional policy that we're unable to make it equitable, which is very, very important. And when we obviously we're in Caribbean Tech Week, shout out to Ingrid Ryle and the entire Silicon Caribbean team for putting this Caribbean Tech Week together. When we look at the Caribbean context and really those countries in the global south, we're seeing that the question is really clear. The question is, will we access these tools on our own terms? We are going through so much with climate change. We're going through so much with economic instability based on that climate change. And we have to ask ourselves, are we able to access these tools and use them to build solutions that are relevant for our specific use case, right? And I know a lot of persons are working on solutions to help teachers better disseminate information, and some persons are working on finance payments to better democratize the distribution of finance or payment services in the Caribbean. So that's just something to keep in mind. So when we look at that idea of policy, right, and the idea of what are the guardrails we're working on, I think these are the six main things we should keep in mind across the policies. So we have the EU AI Act, we have UNESCO, we have other agencies that have gotten some policy frameworks together, and obviously United States has actually issued a executive order. The White House has, in terms of focusing on the investment in these AI technologies. So let's get back to the framework. So we have six main areas. We have transparency, knowing what is being built, how it's using the data, and what it's trained on. Accountability, so how humans remain responsible for all the AI assisted decisions and outcomes. And then fairness, right? So how exactly it must not reproduce and have bias, because data that's trained on is inherently biased, since we're all biased. So how do we actually minimize that and make sure it doesn't scale with the expansion of the technology itself? And then safety is very important. Make sure that we're not risking people nor society based on data breaches and privacy concerns. And this gets us to the privacy aspect of it. How are we looking at personal data being used in these systems? And then how is all of that really wrapped up by human oversight, being able to help us delineate and really track exactly how we're going to be progressing, and making sure we're staying aligned with the values of being equitable, really having economic prosperity, which is very, very much the main impetus for a lot of these firms right now, and making sure it's sustainable as we go towards the future. So this is the panel discussion is coming up. We have about 5 minutes until then. Before that, I just want to again thank everyone for who is on the stream, and you after this you'll be receiving information about exactly how we're going to be focusing on prompts and frameworks, and we're going to be delivering that. So the frameworks are really going to help you understand, hey, I have a team, I want to be more efficient. How am I going to be using AI? You have a framework to help you. I have, I'm a marketer, I'm an advertiser, I want to be more I want to be faster with my output, right? I want to be more thoughtful, be more interesting. How can prompts help you with that? So those frameworks are actually coming up, and we'll be able to dive into how exactly we deliver those. So I'm going to start by bringing up our panelists at this moment. So just give them a little bit to prepare themselves. And our panelists are, I'll let them introduce themselves, but we have Chelsea Wright from Microsoft, who is in supply chain, and we have Davia, who is a psychotherapist, and will give us that perspective. And we're really trying to have a really interesting discussion about AI, how the different fields use it, and how we can start thinking about adapting it for ourselves. So let me bring them up real quick. Okay. Okay. Okay, my amazing panel is here. Is here. Hi everybody, how are we doing?
We're good. Good morning, good
Hi,
afternoon, good
Yes,
evening.
greetings everyone.
good night, everybody. So I'm so excited with these guys. Like I was saying, okay, I need a tech person, but then I need someone who's like non-tech and non in the weeds of it. So that's why we have Davila on the panel with us. So I'm gonna start with just can introduce yourselves, and then we can go into some of the questions. So let's start with Chelsea.
Yeah, thanks for having me, Michael. Great stuff that you're speaking about earlier. Hi, folks. I'm Chelsea Wright. As Michael mentioned, I am currently working as a like program manager at Microsoft on the hardware kind of like engineering side of things. So I wouldn't consider myself like in the weeds, but for context and for all intents and purposes for this convo, I absolutely am that person. Yeah, by day I'm working in supply chain, and then I also have some interests in like governance, policy. So my ear is to the floor with respect to those things as well. Yeah, happy to be here.
Nice, happy to have you. Okay, Davila.
Hi, greetings everyone. Thank you again, Michael, for the invitation. And I'm a clinical psychologist here in Kingston, Jamaica, working now in private practice, but I have done some work in the public sector in hospital system and also our university system. But yeah, I'm working in clinical practice right now, so doing therapy with our clients and some limited assessments as well. But the practice itself offers assessments for clients and I'm excited to have this conversation about AI because it definitely is transforming the way we work and also how our clients interface with us and with the technology. So I'm looking forward to our conversation.
Amazing. So yeah, you kind of start us off, which I'll just let you continue. And really, how are you like currently using AI, and you know, you using it, but then also your clients, like what's the use cases that you've seen so far?
Okay, so and I shared with you previously, I don't know if I am considered the most intentional user of AI in terms of clinical practice. I'm very specific with how I choose to engage with it, and I think, and we'll discuss a bit more as to why I may have some concerns sometimes. But in a general sense, I think I like to use it almost as a starting point, especially when I have and I speak more personally and then more broadly to our colleagues, but when we have, I guess, more complex cases, when there's a lot of overlap with maybe it's diagnoses or other, conditions that may be happening. And I think using AI as a starting point to maybe explore what some of the treatment modalities or the most effective treatment modalities might be for these particularly complex cases is a great way to make it more efficient. So it's, if we were to just do a Google search, we have to kind of sift through a lot of that information first, whereas AI sort of does that part first. And again, of course, with the appropriate prompting, because we want to also ensure that, for our practice anyway, that it is evidence-based, that it is sort of peer-reviewed information, that it's not just we're not just taking what AI has told us, we're also getting the references. And so we're looking at, and I look at, those reference documents and articles and then take it from there. So it's more so a starting point for me
Hmm.
rather than using it to do all of the thinking for me. And I think that's a very important distinction throughout or conversation that for us as clinicians we have to do, right? When we just take the output as gospel, we are not necessarily employing any of the clinical skills, one that we've learned to employ, nor any of the intuition that we also have to rely on because we know our clients, right?
Yeah.
Um, and there are, when I'm speaking more broadly now for general clinicians, I think going back to that efficiency, using AI, I think has helped a lot of clinicians with whether it's progress notes. So these are the notes that we will write up after meeting with a client. Um, Especially if you're in a solo practice, so you're typically doing a lot of the admin work yourself. It takes care of, if you're using particular software and platforms, it can take care of all of that admin work for you, the scheduling of clients and things like that, the emails, the convers, the interaction, the little AI bot that may pop up, on your website. So for solo practitioners, I can see how that absolutely has revolutionized the amount of time it would have taken to address those things versus the time taken to actually just doing clinical practice. So I think in terms of the sort of some of the impact, I think those are some of the key areas that we see some of that changing on the part of the clinician. And again, as I mentioned, diagnosis and treatment planning. But you also asked an interesting question about what I'm seeing with clients. So this is what
Yeah.
we're seeing
Yeah,
with,
because I
how
was like,
clients are engaging with it.
for me, it's like I will, have like, oh, my leg feels weird. What does W like WebMD say? I am literally Mr.
Right, wiki
WebMD.
how.
And then no, and I'm like, when I go to a doctor, I'm like, listen, I'm paying you for this time. I'm asking you every single question I can possibly ask you. So I can just imagine now it's like times 10 where people are like,
Mhm.
I have this disorder. Is this real? So what's that like for you?
So that's a great example, So before people would might have just been Googling their symptoms and maybe gone to a WebMD or something like that, or look at the DSM, which is kind of what we use for that diagnosis. But now they have AI where they can be very specific with who they are, right? So it's their age, it's these are the way the symptoms are presenting for themselves, and they may be getting a more nuanced outcome, right? And so I do have clients who will come to me and say, well, I was talking to Gemini, and they speak about it in these very casual ways as if it's a friend, right? I was
Right,
talking to chat,
personified.
and then they'll tell me what they found, and I welcome the conversation because again, AI is there and we know people are engaging with it. I'd rather my clients be very open about their use of it because then we can discuss and dissect what it is that they're finding. Because again, we know that depending on what the platform is and depending on their own knowledge of prompts and things like that, they could be getting a wide range of things and
Yeah.
information about themselves, right? And so it's very important to kind of break that down and go through that with them and also discuss some of that with them in terms of prompts and just how they're engaging and what that platform is really designed for and how it may be giving you information as well. But then also I think a lot of clients I've noticed are almost using it like in between therapy, just kind of as a little support system, just a little check-in,
Yeah.
how to deal with a particular situation. I'm hearing a lot more references to using AI in that way. And I think for us as clinicians, it's one important for us to understand AI, if for no other reason than the fact that our clients will be using it. So we need to understand what they're engaging with and what information they're receiving and how they are dealing with that information. But then also understanding that in some ways it's providing them with some support. And what does that mean? And what does that mean for our therapeutic relationship? Again, there are so many
Mm,
nuances to that, right? AI could be saying one thing, you're saying another thing. How do you deal with some of those, challenges that may come up in the clinical practice? So I think those are just a few ways that I see it popping up with clients in particular.
that's impressive. Okay, that makes sense. And then Chelsea, well, someone who is very much closer to the tech, even though being non-coding, what would you say are like how you use it and what you're seeing
Yeah.
inside?
Yeah, I'm so happy we're having this conversation because I always wonder about like the actual applications and how it pops up in different industries. So I'm just like geeked out right now, David. Like you have no idea. Um, in comparison, I think it's pretty boring. So the two things that I use day in and day out, the two use cases I'd say, is one, it data analysis. So like now it's like writing scripts or like like different code to pull data or even Excel that's like done what would take a couple hours to
Mm,
synthesize some data is like probably half an hour, um which is completely insane. And then just like what you had mentioned too, Javila, just the admin work that just like goes into any kind of like job that you necessarily have to do is is basically like cut down to like a few hours per week that would take
Mm,
roughly like some days out of the week. So definitely data analysis, um and like that admin work is just going to completely zero. Some things that are on the horizon that I'm pretty excited for, just because of the nature of the kind of work that we do, is keeping up to date with kind of like what's going on in industry. So leveraging like agents to kind of like not only pull news or like sift through certain topics, but also kind of like validate those topics and kind of like keep us up to date with regards to what's happening on the hardware side. So with like industry, if there are like different part shortages or like what other hyperscalers are doing in industry, um, having agents to kind of help sort through that data and cut through the noise basically, is going to be a huge game changer. And even just leveraging just what's out there today, like we use Copilot at Microsoft. So Copilot, um, which is basically like open AI, is still good in and of itself. And like shifting gears over to like agents, I'm seeing a lot of different agents pop up, um agents that are very, very specific to tasks. And
mm,
the trend is almost as if either per team, per org, or even per maybe two or one employee, you'll kind of have your own agent that will kind of serve as like that communication or like admin for you. So it talks to like different person's agents. So a lot of like the back and forth and
Mhm.
managing timelines and that kind of like admin or even PM work, program management work, that folks would consider as program management work, will be kind of like cut down. And we're already kind of seeing it cut down with the rise as agents become more widely adopted.
Well,
So
adapted. Yeah.
all in all, it's cutting down a lot of like the work in terms of I guess like the busy work. And I find myself, or we find ourselves kind of like focusing on like the core strategic um like thinking and that kind of work rather than the tactical execution day to day.
Yeah, yeah. Like I feel like so practically, I think that's the actually the counterintuitive point where people always say, "Oh, if you if AI is doing the work, then like what are you doing?" I'm actually doing the work. AI is making like the vehicle probably for you to see the work, which is like the deck, for example, right? It's like the thought process of, and I use a big example is like designing like logos and stuff like that. Like if you think
mm,
about it, where someone comes to you and say, "Hey, I run a sustainability company, I need a logo," right? You're like, "Okay, great, I know AI, so I'm just gonna use AI to make them the logo." You make a logo that's this red, like a red logo, and like, "Hey, here, great logo," by the end of the day. And you're like, the person's like, "I don't know, I'm just not feeling it." But the artist who knows that, hey, because this is a sustainability company, the colors I should generally stick with are like the earth tones, like greens, browns, and then
Hmm.
the prompt, I'm able to like deliver that to the tool and then get the logo for the person. That to me, as someone who draws, paints, sculpts, design, doesn't make me feel less of an artist. It makes me feel more
mm,
like it makes me feel more confident in my creativity than I've ever felt before, because I know that without that human creativity, the tools really mean nothing, right? So it's like, how are you, seeing the capabilities with the agents and stuff, and then thinking, okay, it can help me do more, but at the core of it, I need to know this is what makes a logo look good. This is what makes video campaigns like land with customers. This is what makes my senior vice president understand a chart. It's not just analysis, but it's how I present it. So there's so many things I think goes into using the tools, and I think a lot of people will be forced to go back to like 101. Are you really a good marketer? Do
Right,
you
like the
really
core,
understand?
yeah,
Right.
the core of like the
And
profession.
I
Agreed.
think that's I think that's the ideal way that we want people to be utilizing AI, right? It's assistive. It's not doing everything for you. It's not doing the thinking for you, which I think is what people
Right.
think it always does. Some people definitely do offload quite a lot of their thinking to
Cognitive
AI and don't use it at
offloading.
all, but in a general sense, I think that's the kind of relationship we want to have with it, where it might be, as you said, maybe doing some of the administrative tasks that don't really require much of our thought and critical analysis. But when we are looking at output of certain information, or that's a starting point, as I mentioned, we are then applying our knowledge. We still have to know what it is that we're doing, right?
Right.
Applying our knowledge and our critical analysis skills to determine and decipher the information and also its relevance. And again, speaking more so as a clinician, you spoke about it earlier, Michael. Biases and things like that.
Hmm.
What data is it trained on? We have to know the clinical relevance to our population, the cultural relevance to our population, and we still have to have that
Yep.
information and be able to transfer that into actual practice. So there's still a lot that we have to be doing on our own rather than just sort of offloading it to AI. And quickly with Chelsea, you mentioned the agents, which I think is one of those bigger, newer trends now where people are
Hmm.
really just using agents to, scan your email, do all the replies and things like that. For us again, within our practice, for us, we have to always keep at the forefront of the data that we're dealing with. So as much as I would love an agent to go through my emails and sift through, these are clients, right? This is data, right? This is protected data. How is that, again, we're thinking about the safety of data and the use of the particular platform that you're using. How do they deal with that data? Those are things that as clinicians we have to be knowledgeable of and aware of, and also the changes that come with some of these
Exactly.
platforms. What might have been protected initially may change now with an update, right? So we have to also be
Yep.
very aware and attuned to some of those things.
I just sent an update, like literally an update that comes
Absolutely.
at like 2 a.m. in a random email to you. Like
Right.
like, hey, we've changed this privacy setting at 2
By
a.m.
9 a.m.,
And you're
who knows
like,
what just
Right.
happened?
okay, whatever. And then yeah. So yeah, that's a big part of it for sure. I think next one to like help to more this question of, are you a beginner, intermediate, or advanced user of AI? Which there's this graphic that really has like, I don't know if you've seen just where it's like these squares and it has like the people who actually have used just the free AI tools is like maybe 15% of like the whole population. And then the paid tools are like 5, and then 1% is like automations and the agents and stuff like that. I feel like, and this kind of why I want to like someone who is totally outside the bubble to kind of like, because I use it
Assess myself.
right. No, yeah, I use it so much for
Same.
everything. Like and it's interesting because I like when it surprises me. But I've used it so much for everything. Whether I mean, it might be something as like I have. I remember one day I had like it was summer in New York, amazing. But like 5 friends I wanted to meet up at different times, and I had to like reach them at different times and stuff. And I literally say, hey, I need to meet 5 people across New York. This is when I need to meet them. What's the best way for me to get where I need to get, and give me like buffer time. And it goes with the whole thing, right? And I'm like, okay,
Yeah.
great. And this was like like a year and a half ago. So I was thinking like, how would you assess yourself as like beginner? Just so for everyone else, like for me, I think a beginner is write me an email or just like Google search stuff.
Mm.
Intermediate is more like okay, I now know that I can use different tools to do different things. So I can use ChatGPT for one thing, Gemini for one thing, and then Gamma for something else. And then I'll say advanced is like and beyond that now to like workflows, automation, agents. So yeah, where would you say you fall? You can't fall in between, I don't know, like in
I
between.
almost feel like I want to ask you where you think I would fall, but I'm going to tell you
Yeah.
Yeah,
I'm going to tell you where I think I fall. Because one, AI is such a rapidly evolving field, more so than any other field I think we've really,
Yep.
interfaced with. And so, though I generally would probably dare to say at the early, the beginning stages of intermediate, maybe.
Mm-hmm,
One,
mm-hmm.
because I think I'm relatively tech savvy. I am interested, so I do try to learn about it. I think maybe more deeply sometimes than maybe an average person. Um, so that's why I was tempted to say intermediate, but I feel like maybe I realistically I'm like, and if beginner had like 5 levels, maybe I'm like beginner three, is what I would say.
Okay, yeah,
And
yeah,
that's where I want to, reasonably and soberly assess myself as.
right. Okay, okay. And Charles, would you say because you don't build the agents, you're not like in advanced yet, or
Oh no, because yeah, definitely not advanced because I'm currently I currently like write like BRDs or business requirements for the folks building the agents and the automations. So I'm
okay,
like I'm not
yeah,
advanced at
yeah,
all. But probably like somewhere intermediate-ish.
right,
Um depending on like how we define those, because I definitely have different AIs for different use cases. How I
Right,
prompt
me
is
too.
different. Um, you know, I have a few automations set up, but no agents yet. And I want to be able to have, this is wishful thinking, but pull my like information from the cloud and have like my own, like a Chelsea GPT. Because as the I guess what's the word I'm looking for? I guess the bigger it gets, and this is
Mm,
kind of gearing towards just like, revealing some of my thoughts is like there is some distrust in terms of like, safety and the real issues that we're yet to talk about, but there's a lot of that to think about. And if it's, having things like your voice and like some of if it knows how you think, then there's a lot of
right.
um influences with algorithms that can be made and marketed to you just by having like your data. So yeah, that's the goal. So to answer your question, I'm intermediate, Michael.
yeah, yeah. No, so I feel like
Intermediate too.
I feel like I think I can't bring myself to like advanced three. I love how I've adopted your like 1, 2, 3 spectrum also, but
Right.
bring myself to advanced three until I make like a full agent. So far, gotten to like obviously the workflows and some automation stuff. So one thing I have is like every Monday at 9 a.m. I get rundown on like the top marketing campaigns in like a particular industry and like what worked, what doesn't work. So I can like, okay, good, as I'm going into the day and stuff. Or something might like recently I built this automation to like, as Chelsea knows, like scrape my email for all non-profit UN adjacent emails. So and that was like literally finding this like 30-minute YouTube video and then spending like 2 hours building this automation thing in it, and it was really good. I was like, whoa, click a button and it like goes through the email, finds the stuff. So there, but like for the agent section of it, which I think a lot of people, which I was actually talking to another client, where basically you have the spectrum of AI agent, and then you have just like using it for like questions and workflows and stuff, and then you get to the automations. I think people should really try to go through, first let's start with what can first start writing down everything you do as like the baseline,
Mm,
then go to okay, what can these tools help me to do right now, so how can I build a workflow. So maybe it's instead of me spending time reviewing all these documents, I can now find a way to, hey, let me use AI to help me, sift through the reports. And then the automation. So how am I doing something more like lining up the tools to say, hey, report comes in, goes to Excel sheets, then it goes to like payment or something like that. And then agent is like, you just do it on your own. And then I come in, check it, right? So this spectrum. So I think it's just like getting on that spectrum. But I feel like a lot of people are definitely in the beginning. I think we underestimate how much we use it compared to everyone else, for sure. Um,
Mm.
yeah. So I think definitely wrapping up with like a really crucial topic about the privacy and what do you think AI should be able to do and humans should keep doing themselves.
That's a meaner question to end with. um,
It is.
so I think, and again, I guess I'll try and do it in as short a time as possible. But again, for my field in particular, it all boils down to the type of data that we're working with, right? Because when we're engaging with AI, we're using data, right? We're putting data in there, and because of that, there always has to be some sort of human oversight in the sense that even as, again, we're speaking about agents and automating things, once it has to do with client data, right? Which even our admin work, again, scheduling, this is admin work, right? Pairing up a client with a particular therapist, that means that you have to know details about the client and their cases and so forth.
Hmm.
We have to always be aware of how is this agent, or whatever the AI platform or tool might be, how is it doing it ethically and in accordance with data protection, rules in our country or wherever it is that you may be practicing. Because again, even with that transparency, if we are utilizing AI in any capacity, we have to declare that to our clients and they have to consent to it as well, right? So it's not just for me as much as, again, I'm hearing about the agents and it sounds lovely. It sounds like a luxury almost to have it do all of those things. But we have to be very aware that one, is people's data that we're dealing with, and we have to really understand. And this is why there are more specific mental health related tools that are being developed now, because
Yeah.
it's not just this general data that we can just put in there. It has to be dealt with in a very particular way. And even when we're talking about the ownership of that data and where, who owns it in the end, if I decide I no longer want to use this platform, what happens, right? So there are all these other things that we maybe don't think about when we're just using it generally. But when we're using it in clinical practice, these are things that we have to take into consideration. And again, going back to the algorithmic biases and things like that with the output, we have to actually read through those things and not
Mhm.
just take it as gospel, but really critically assess and analyze and determine what is important, what is true, what is relevant, and applicable. So I think for my field, it's still just very assistive. Like in terms of what it should do or couldn't do, I think it's more so about whether or not it can do so within the confines of the ethics of our field and the data protection rules and laws, regarding our field. I think that's really kind of where it needs to land. And it sounds like that's in the works, but I think that's going to be a very continuous
Yeah,
process.
for sure, for sure. Definitely continues. And Chelsea, what do you have
Absolutely.
to add?
Yeah. So, as far as what should humans continue doing with
Mm,
regards to to that, um, a lot. um, so grounding us again, right? Remember, I work with the hardware that powers kind of like this entire infrastructure. Um, and I think we really need to continue like being that in the feedback loop, just in general. Um, with regards to like the decisions that are being made of like where data centers are put up, for example, um as it relates to like the policy and energy and the resources that are going into um the building and consumption and like the energy consumption that it relates to like the overall hardware infrastructure of the data centers. And then so like we definitely need to continue being in the feedback loop there, and just the decision to like continue going forward. In my day to day, we use a lot of models to like optimize for like optimization. Like that's a lot of like what we do, because we have to move and work with a lot of variables with regards to like supply and demand and stuff like that. um and what's important is that we like there's a human in there like reviewing and looking and ensuring like that, hey, maybe things don't need to necessarily be optimized to be like cheaper, faster, having more energy, like for the sake of just having more, so like just making sure the human element that isn't necessarily factored into like models and like I guess like math um normally is factored in some like other way. I'd say like those are my top things.
for sure. Thank you. All right, this was great. I love like the back and forth and some really interesting thoughts, especially around the privacy aspects of it, and how people can start see, think about where they lie in terms of using AI and where they want to take their skills. I know that right now there's a threat about a lot of jobs are being lost and will be lost, and persons trying to figure out what the human aspect of it still is. But I think these conversations are so important because it helps us to, you know, bring our perspectives together and also critically analyze the issues, the trade-offs, and what's the most like sustainable, equitable way to go forward. So thank you so
Absolutely.
much, panel.
Thank you. Thank you. This is
Thanks
great.
for having us.
Yes, yes. All right, so let me go to the wrap up and get you guys your resources. So thanks, guys. Bye bye. Okay, so we've come to the end of leading with human creativity in an AI world, and this is super, super important. I'm so excited that everyone was here. I'm so excited about giving you guys the resources and the prompts afterwards. And I just wanted to talk a little bit more about my own story with AI. So this is 2022, 2023. ChatGPT has just come out and everyone's using it, being really interested in it. And I remember, going home, starting to use it on my own. So I remember going home, starting to use it on my own, and the feeling I had as a someone who makes art, working on something for 2 weeks, and as you come to the end, 3 days out, 2 days out, 1 day out, you get this rush as the painting is finished. For example, is the same rush I felt using the AI tools, and for me, it was how do I lean into that, right? Lean into understanding more about what's that feeling. How do I get better prompts? How do I think about this as a resource in the macro sense? And it's been really fulfilling, and I'm really excited that everyone is able to benefit from it. So I would say right now, to wrap this up, the human advantage is there, right? So judgment, that's forced by experience. We have the values that help us to survive the pressure that's coming with the in the job market, and the courage to act in uncertainty is really very, very important as we navigate the AI space. So remember, you're the artist, AI is the studio. And let's talk, let's make some magic. Scan that QR code and you can definitely reach out about how you want, if you want one-on-one sessions around how to start using AI, coaching your team, as well as building AI automation and growth systems to really help you be more efficient. So we're going to be going through, hey, this is what your team does. These are the areas that AI can start helping you. And this is how we can make sure that we're continuing to lead with human creativity in an AI world. So thank you all so much and have a really, really great rest of your day.